はい。
Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Let's Discuss a Paper right after reading it. In this episode, we chose a paper that we wanted to read, and then we read it in 2 hours, and then we come back to discuss it. Um, Today, we have two people. One is me, and the other is Yota. So, Yota, can you introduce yourself?
Hi. I'm Yota Kashima. I'm a research engineer in Japan.
Okay, I am Qian Chen, and I'm currently a PhD student at Monash University, Australia. So the paper we are going to discuss today is by Nadine Dijkstra and Steve Fleming, titled Subjective Signal Strength Distinguishes Reality from Imagination. This paper was published last month on Nature Communications. So now I'll first give a summary of the paper, and then we will discuss any questions we have. Okay, so for this paper, the background is that in everyday life, in order to engage with our environment more effectively, we not only plan our behavior based on what's immediately in the environment, like the incoming stimulus, but we also actively engage in mental imagery, which is that we simulate what's going to happen next and what's going to appear in our environment next, and then we plan our behavior accordingly. So this gives us two visual mechanisms, right? One is visual perception of what's immediately in the environment, and the other one is visual imagery that simulates what happens next. And past research found that these two mechanisms are most likely have a very overlapping neural basis. So from our perspective, with visual imagery and visual perception sharing the same neural mechanisms, how do we distinguish between what we imagine and what we actually see? And previous research suggests two possible mechanisms. The first is the presence of intention in imagery. Basically, you know it when you're imagining something. And this kind of top-down knowledge and this intention for imagining something is what separates visual imagery from visual perception. For example, if you have this visual sensory signals of some kind of stimulus, if this sensory signal is accompanied by a top-down intention signal, then we know that, oh, this is what we imagined. On the other hand, if the sensory signal is not paired with this top-down intention signal, then we know that, oh, this comes from the environment. This is bottom-up. And this top-down intention signal can explain away the sensory signal coming from imagery, and it also gets a bit too strong and becomes over-explanatory in times. So a previous experiment found that if you ask participants to imagine seeing something, and then you sneaky present the stimulus that they imagine on a screen, they will still report their perceptual experience of seeing that real stimulus as what they have imagined. So in a sense, this top-down signal can explain away even the bottom-up sensory signals if what you see and what you imagine are the same as each other. And another mechanism suggested by past research is signal strength. Basically, according to these people, if something we experience comes from our imagination, then the sensory signal for this kind of imagination tends to be weak and less precise compared to when we actually perceive them and the signal comes from the external environment. So far, it is very difficult to verify which of these mechanisms are at play. In a sense, they don't even know, whether only one of the mechanism contributes to the differentiation or both of them contributes. And also they don't know if both of them contributes to the differentiation, they don't know how much contribution each of these mechanisms have. And this is because in actual experiments, if you want to manipulate imagery and perception, it's hard to kind of manipulate them in an independent manner because imagery and perception interact with each other. So if participants rate something as real, let's say, you don't know how much this report has been contaminated by imagery. So the source, tracking the source of their judgment would be very difficult. On the other hand, from the participant's perspective, if you over like multiple trials, you do something like you have them to imagine something, and then you present the real stimulus, they will start to notice it. And then they pay extra attention to external signals. So that kind of violates what you wanted to do in the first place. So the aim of the current study is to determine the mechanisms that we use to distinguish imagery from reality. And they will do this by combining data from a large-scale psychophysics experiment, from the neuroimaging data, and computational modeling. So I'll first introduce what they did with their psychophysics paradigm and how they analyze the data. And then I'll explain how they do with the neuroimaging part. So for the online psychophysics, for the psychophysics paradigm, they did it online with 400 participants. And each participant, they only test them on 10 trials. And for each participant, the first trial to the 9th trial, they just present noise and then ask the participant to imagine seeing something from the noise. And in the 10th trial, which is the critical trial, they will actually have something emerging from that noise, some kind of pattern emerging from that noise. And the pattern can be either congruent or incongruent with the things that they ask the participant to imagine. After the 10th trial, in the 10th trial, after they present the emerging stimulus, they ask the participant to rate how vivid their visual imagery was, and also ask them if there was something in the noise, like actually there was a pattern in the noise, or it was purely imagined. So this is like a perceptual reality rating of the stimulus in the 10th trial. And importantly, they only do this imagination and then present the actual stimulus shenanigan once per participant, so that they cannot do this. They do not have expectations about whether an actual stimulus will occur, or like have this trial by trial attention shift like the previous experiments. So with this paradigm, they built 3 computational models representing 3 unique predictions from each mechanism. So the first model is a Bayes null hypothesis model, where it hypothesized that visual imagery and visual perception have completely independent neural mechanisms, rather than overlapping mechanisms like the previous research suggests. And in this case, because their neural mechanisms are completely different, distinguishing between the two is easy. And also, most importantly, in terms of the behavioral results, it predicts that the vividness rating of visual imagery would be unrelated to the reality rating of the stimulus in the 10th trial. The second model is based on the top-down intention signal model. So in this model, it predicts that when participants have rate their imagery as highly vivid, then when you actually present the stimulus in the 10th trial, they are more likely to rate it as imaginary. So in a sense, high vividness imagery rating is associated with rating the stimulus as imagery as well, rather than rating that as real. And finally, they have a model for signal strength distinguishing between imagery and reality. So in this model, basically whether something is real is based on how strong the signal, sensory signal for that stimulus is. In this case, when participants imagine something and then they actually see the congruent stimulus for it, then this predicts a very strong internal combined with very strong external signal together to create a very strong, vivid experience of the stimulus. And this strong combined signal was then verified for their reality against a reality threshold. Basically, if the combined signal strength is strong enough, then it will be rated as real. In other words, if participants vividly imagine something represented a strong internal signal, and then they actually see the congruent stimulus, then they will rate that as real. So with these three models, they use that to analyze their data, and then they found that participants are more likely to judge the stimulus to be real in congruent condition. Basically, if they imagine something and then they actually see it, they will rate it as real. And moreover, in the case when they rate seeing something as real, it also corresponds to higher vividness report. So together, they both suggest that imagining something and seeing something together contribute to a high reality rating. So this is strongly consistent with the third model we just talked about, which is the signal strength model. And next up is that the neuroimaging data part. So in the psychophysics experiment, they found that visual imagery and visual perception together contributes to reality rating. And it's just the signal strength, combined signal strength that matters. So they were thinking if it is possible that visual imagery and visual perception have overlapping neural mechanisms to some degrees. And there were like, how do I say this, overlapping brain areas that tracks both vividness report and the visibility of external stimuli. To verify this hypothesis, they reanalyzed the neuroimaging data they collect from a previous experiment in which they just asked participants to imagine something and then show them the stimuli, and then they asked them to rate how vivid the imagination was and also how clear they could see the stimulus. And they found that, yes, there were overlapping brain areas that can explain both the visibility of the stimulus and the vividness of imagination. That's it for the summary. Okay. Do you have any questions?
For the first online experiment, psychophysics experiment, their hypothesis and the results were clear to me. But for the neuroimaging and data analysis, I am not so sure about it. Yeah. So they didn't design or they didn't perform a new experiment for this, right? What they did is just they reanalyzed the already corrected data. So maybe that made me to understand what they wanted to do here neuroimaging analysis. But as you explained, I think the motivation of this neuro imaging analysis is clear, right? So they thought that the same brain region will be kind of involved in both imagination and real, external perception, right?
Yeah, but the difference is that the behavioral task for this neuroimaging part, like the behavioral task underlying this neuroimaging experiment, is that they don't ask participants to rate the reality of the stimulus. Rather, they ask them to rate the visibility of them. So like how clear you can see this thing, and also the vividness report. So their goal was to see whether perceptual experience or visual perception and visual imagery have overlapping mechanisms.
Yeah, but the simple prediction is just these brain areas should show a stronger activation as you increase or as participants report more a higher scale for the vividness, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. I'm, to be honest, not so clear the trend on the figure. So the visibility from 1 to 4, and the 4 is the most vivid one. And then there should be some linear or non-linear trend from 1 to 4. And yeah, they did some, statistical analysis, but yeah, it's just not clear to me. Yeah, but anyway, so the online experiment part, I think it's really, clever, because, the key point is that, we can do this, experimental task only once for each participant.
Yeah.
And if we want to do it in lab, real, setting, then it's gonna be very, time consuming.
Yeah.
But in online experiment, we can easily recruit participants, and then the task is so simple and short. So I think that's best fit with this online setting.
Yeah.
But at the same time, we also did online experiment, and then sometimes participants behave or made a response in a weird way, or sometimes can be just a bot, right? This report 444444444111111. That's it. So yeah, of course they did some screening for that, for the analysis, but
They actually did some simulations to see what the results patterns are if participants weren't paying attention or responding.
Okay.
And the effect is still there. So I guess.
Okay, good. That's great.
Also, I feel like if you only ask people to do 10 trials, they are probably going to comply very well. it's like this kind of shift happens when you ask them to do 100 trials. And at first, this is really interesting, and then they get, it's really, it's like never ending.
I see. Yeah. It's going to be just 1 minute or something, right? The task will be really short, quick. So I guess participants will never be never be bored at the so yeah. And another thing is that in the discussion they mentioned about the possible implication of this result on the hallucination. They mentioned that maybe this brain regions hyperactivated without any external signals that can create some imaginary perception, and that is consistent with their proposed mechanism. So the same regions encode information for imaginary and real perception. So yeah, that's think makes sense. Yeah, reasonable. Yeah. Well, from me, yeah, that's yeah, that yeah, that's it. If you have any questions or comment, you can.
I don't really have many questions. Yeah, I think there are stories mixing hypothesis, signal strength hypothesis makes intuitive sense, right? So in a case when you didn't imagine seeing something, but you see it, then it would be unexpected. So it's likely that it will appear less real. But if you expect that, you imagine you will see anyway, then you actually see it, then you're like, of course that's real. So I feel like this makes a lot of sense. Although initially I spent a lot of time understanding the three hypotheses here for some reason. Because in the background, when they talk about signal strength, I thought what they mean is that imagery has weaker signal, and then perception has stronger signal, and we just need to see whether the signal is strong to decide whether it is imagery or perception. But then in their hypothesis, they explicitly say that the signal strength is a combination of imagery and perceptual signal. So I got a little bit confused, because initially they said we want to distinguish them, and now we said, oh, I'm going to combine the two. And that's the part that slightly confuses me, although it eventually makes sense.
I see. So yeah, I just wondering, within this 10 trials, so the first 9 trials did not include this stimuli, right? Just noisy display. And I wonder how many people see the vivid imaginary stimulus without the real stimuli. So here they have, the full scale from 1 to 4, and then sometimes participants say 4. It's clear, even though the stimulus is not there. So yeah, I have never done this before, so I'm just curious how it will look like. So do I really see this, rating or not? Have you ever tried this experiment or something similar?
I haven't tried this experiment, but do you remember at the boardroom where we have our lab meeting, their table is of the similar texture. And then sometimes I stare at them and then I found like, oh, the purple dots, they actually connect together.
Okay,
So yeah, I mean it can work.
I see. Yeah, okay.
But this is dynamic noise, so it's probably different. Slightly different.
I see.
Wait. The fifth trial. Oh, sorry, the 10th trial. Because I was looking at their figures and then I was like, oh, the 10th trial. And then I suddenly see, oh, this pattern. And then I realized it's for the 10th trial where they actually presented the pattern. But yeah, just looking at the static one in the figure, it's hard to say, how you can see like a clear pattern. I wonder why they need to do 9 trials before the critical one.
So you mean we can do basically the same thing, only with 2 trial?
Or just 1 trial, right? It either appears or it does not, or something like that.
1 trial.
Yeah, 1 trial, you either show them complete dynamic noise or one that has emerging pattern.
Yeah, that's true.
So that would.
Yeah. So in the end, they use only the response from the last trial, right? In the analysis. So yeah.
Is it? Yeah, so I'm just not sure about the choice of 9 trials. Do you need 9 trials for them to, like, why do you need 9 trials? Because imagining seeing something from dynamic noise doesn't really need 9 trials to get the hang of, right?
I don't know, but maybe so. In order to induce some, imaginary perception, we might need, sometimes. Like again, the table you mentioned.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah. Of course, you will not, always have that, imaginary perceptions. But, you are looking at the table, and then at some point you notice, oh, this is this or something like that. So maybe sometimes required.
Maybe.
Or maybe another reason can be this can be, the 6 trials can be used for some screening or something. I don't know. Maybe they mentioned something in the method, but I didn't read, or I didn't have time to read the method part in detail, so not sure about the reason why 9 trials.
Yeah, I also didn't have full time to go through.
think, yeah, discrimination performance bureau. So yeah, I'm now skimming through the method part, and then they mentioned about the screening. And then they said they removed, or the study removed, 73 participants were removed because of having discrimination performance below 55%. Yeah, I don't know. They might use some, responses from the 9 trials to screen, maybe. Yeah, anyway. Oh,
Yeah, I don't have anything else.
okay, so shall we finish?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, then, yeah, see you next week.
Yeah.
Bye.